Hello, I'm Iris Tommelein, a professor at the University of California, Berkeley, and it's a pleasure to present some new thoughts on the Parade of Trades. It's a game that many of you know and that we have played for more than 20 years as a means to explore concepts of interdependence and variation. It's a game that Greg Howell introduced me to in 1997. He and I collaborated together with David Riley on modeling it using computer simulation and presenting it at the 5th IGLC in Australia in 1998. Greg passed away last month, and in recognition of all his teaching in lean construction, I would like to dedicate this paper to him. In this presentation, I'll take you on a thought exercise about workflow reliability and specifically on how we can use capacity buffers to achieve it. I'll illustrate my thoughts using the results of a simulation model. The original game looks like this. 5 trades are lined up in a linear sequence, and they are to pass 100 units from the start to the end. The number of units they can pass in any given week is determined by the roll of a die. A number of alternative dice are available for each trade to choose from, each having an average roll of 5. A lesson learned from the game is that lower variability is better to reliably achieve an outcome. Of course, which die we choose for each trade depends on what the customer wants and on the dice available. Let's assume that the customer wants their project delivered in 24 weeks. 24 time units is the target condition. If all trades use an all 5 die, this will be achieved as you see in the upper left figure, but the figures below it show what happens when all trades use a 3-7 die. On the left are the results of a single game. On the right are the mean values and the standard deviations based on 1,000 replications, so that the figure gives a better sense of the general trend that may be expected. The 3-7 die has more variation than the all 5 die, so it's more likely that the project will take longer. If we add even more variation, say by using a 1-9 die, the project will likely take even longer. Now, project duration is an important metric, but what other metrics might we consider? It seems to me that the total amount of time each trade spends on site also is an important metric, because trades are always juggling multiple projects. It's hard for them to commit to a crew's start date on a new project if they are uncertain when that crew will finish its previous project. And as you see, the spacing between the solid lines gives a sense of wasted capacity, and that metric is important too. Moving on from those early lessons, in recent years we have been working with industry practitioners to implement tact planning on their project as a means to achieve workflow reliability, so that everyone involved can more predictably complete their project in terms of cost and time. This then had me wonder, how would you tact the parade of trades? And also, what metrics would you use to tell if your tact plan is a good one? Project duration really matters to the general contractor. Time on site and capacity really matter to the trade. Are these metrics at odds with one another? Is there a way to balance them? We understand that the use of capacity buffers is crucial to the success of tact planning, and yet the use of capacity buffers is barely mentioned in the literature or studied in any detail. Time, inventory and information, contingency and more recently also space buffers have been studied in much greater detail. So let's dig a little deeper into the concept of capacity. Capacity is tied to process capability, which is the probability distribution describing the variability in the output of a process under normal operating conditions. In the parade game, each die can be viewed as representing a crew's process capability. That is the amount of work that crew can do in a given week. Of course, one can imagine that there are many dice to choose from. Given that we said that the customer wants their project in 24 weeks, achievable when each trade uses an all 5 die, which die among those available should we pick? Perhaps the trade selected a crew with 3-7 process capability and then, having committed to meeting the Tact plan that requires passing 5 units each week, was able to improve that crew's performance so that the crew shows up on the project with a 4-6 process capability. If we assume that the variability of the die stems from the trade's process capability, how then would we tact a parade? Let's go back to the simulation model and add some elements to explore the use of capacity buffers and collect results for our metrics. Our model uses a software called EasyStrobe, which offers simple elements to visualize what might otherwise be buried in computer code, so you will see a lot of elements. I'll expand on the details for trade B here, and you can imagine that similar details apply to each of the other trades. Let's look at 3 groupings of elements. The first one, marked in green, is to track the trade's time on site. Start B has 1 unit in it, 1 crew. B mobilizes has a duration of 1 week to model that the crew gets to site in B ready 1 week into the project. Likewise, crew C will arrive 2 weeks into the project, and so on. When B's crew has done all their work, total B will have 100 units in it. As soon as that's the case, B can leave the site. B demobilizes. The second grouping, marked in green, models the role of a die. Here we can insert any die to represent any kind of trade process capability. Each week, B rolls their die. The computer then randomly picks a value from the die's probability distribution, which is the number rolled, and this determines the number B can pass. The other details of the model are not relevant for this discussion, so I won't elaborate on them. The third grouping, marked in green, captures at the end of every week that any units left in number B can pass are lost capacity. Capacity is a perishable resource. Now let's insert the die that B brought to the project. 4-6 is their process capability. And let's say that 4-6 is also the process capability of all other trades. With this model now, we can experiment and compare scenarios. The scenarios on the left is one we already know from previous work. The one in the middle shows trade B using a 4-6 die, but also having standby capacity so that when a 4 is rolled, whoever is on standby will make up for the shortfall in meeting the tact and make it a 5. The scenario on the right also shows trade B with a 4-6 die, but here an extra unit of capacity is added regardless of the outcome of the roll. Let me share first then the results of the simulations for 100 replications in terms of project duration. Clearly, the 4-6 parade shown in red is the slowest one. The 5-6 parade, shown in blue, is much more predictable in achieving the 24-week project duration. And the 5-7 parade, shown in brown, can be faster, but its likely completion time is wider in range. Faster can be better, but often assumes that whomever comes next can take advantage of an earlier than planned completion, and this is not necessarily the case. This slide then shows the simulation results in terms of the time trade spent on site. Because the 4-6 parade is slower to complete, obviously the trade shown in red will spend more time on site as is expected, and likewise the ordering of blue versus brown is as expected based on their average rolls. But note that the maximum time for each is pretty close. Here too, the minimum durations in the brown scenario are smaller than those in the blue scenario, but this advantage might be wasted if there's no work to immediately follow next. Finally, the third results slide shows the cumulative number of units of lost capacity. Here we have accounted for lost capacity without including standby capacity. That standby capacity is used 50% of the time, every time the trade rolls a 4. This chart will likely raise many questions that certainly warrant discussion and further study. However, it's clear that the blue parade is more stable in performance, and that, I think, should make us think why don't we use standby capacity more often? It's a form of underloading to achieve workflow reliability. In manufacturing, standby capacity may be offered by the supervisor who gets called when the line worker pulls the end on. In construction, we have foremen who can play a key role in creating workflow reliability. However, the pressure to produce may tempt them to play the 5-7 dice game, instead of using their excess standby capacity to observe the work, spot opportunities for improvement in quality and safety, and work with the crew to increase their process capability. When a crew's process capability improves, in fact, the foreman may have even more excess standby capacity. We can argue about it, but that is a good thing. So really, you'll say, who wants to pay for standby capacity? Well, cost is an output metric. From an operations science perspective, we know that when there's variability in a system, you will pay for it. It's not if, but when you will pay. A production system must therefore be designed to make variability visible, as I've done here by focusing on process capability and highlighting when it falls short of expectations. When expectations are not met, standby capacity is used. This use signals that the process capability has variability to drive out. Over time, when less standby capacity is needed, the system will become more stable, and this will likely lower the cost. With this in mind, we can design the production system then in all its dimensions of customer value and requirements, process capability, interrelatedness of parts of the network, and where still needed, resort to using buffers. To conclude then, let me say that the Parade of Trades offers many opportunities for us to gain deeper understanding of production system performance. I highlighted here the use of capacity buffers in the form of standby capacity that can be used in Tact planning in order to achieve workflow reliability. I look forward to further discussion with you on these topics. Thank you.